Well, Henshaw here again, Constitutional Crisis Channel. Yet another video related to the recent non-election. This one concerns the effect on the Supreme Court docket of the incoming Trump administration. And this one could be a big deal because a lot of crap that's before the court now, including cases about transgender rights and this, that, and the other, and rights of immigrants, a lot of it relates to executive orders issued by presidents. Now that for me has personally been a very troubling issue for a very long time because the way I read the Constitution, we don't make laws by executive orders. The good news about it is that when Trump gets in there, he's at liberty to change or even abolish some of the executive orders from his immediate predecessor and basically change the law that way, which is not how a federated Republican government is supposed to work. If that happens, well and good, but what it may mean is that, as you may be aware, that the court has accepted a case out of Virginia with this transgender trying to use the boys' bathroom in a high school. That case may go off the docket entirely because you know damn well Trump is going to appoint, in effect, another Antonin Scalia, and that's going to give the conservatives 5 votes, solid votes, and that case is going to go away. So the liberal part is probably going to move to dig the case, dismissed as improvidently granted, in order that they don't give any what they would call free shots at issues like that until they get a more liberal court. This same thing happened back in the late 1960s when Trickey first got elected, and the then liberal wing of the court, which is Bill Brennan and Justice Thurley No Good Marshall, told their clerks not to give any free shot to the Fourth Amendment and suffer some small losses, quote unquote. And it was a real concern because with the Nixon appointees coming in, who happened to be Lewis Powell and Bill Rehnquist, two that are close to my personal top 10 over the long haul. The big fear was they were going to overturn Miranda v. Arizona, which doesn't bother me now that I know the truth about Miranda. But nevertheless, there was some real concern on the court. They might undo a lot of the Warren Court precedents, which did not happen for better or worse. Well, the same situation now. And the liberals are going to go very gently in areas like this in order not to set binding precedents that will be difficult to overturn later. My other real problem with this, though, is that presidents are governing by executive order. What power is it that they are using to do that? Well, there's a couple of theories there that I have about that. One is that if we have a state of rebellion or invasion, and you might be able to assume that from the fact that even a non-statutory writ of habeas corpus has apparently been suspended, as it was in my South Carolina case, and you'll hear a lot more about that one down the road. If that's the case, then the powers that be behind the government think the rebellion and invasion during the 1860s is still in existence. And that gives the president grounds to issue executive orders and rule that way. And think about it. If that was a war, and Congress never did overtly say that, in fact, they said the opposite. This was not a war of attrition here, or a war of conquest. How do you end wars? By a treaty. So far as I know, there never was one between the United States government and the Confederate States of America. All we had was the surrender of Lee to Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. So does that state of rebellion or invasion still exist? That's a question we're going to be asking in a traffic court. And you can be sure the commissioners there are not going to love to hear this kind of a question. If that's what's going on. I don't know. State of war. You may or may not be aware, for example, and this is a well-known example from World War II, that you would think ended on September 2nd, 1945 on the USS Missouri when Japan signed the peace treaty. No, it didn't. Not until 1953, when old bubblehead Eisenhower gets into office, did the war formally end. And there's a series of interesting cases we'll talk about later from the Supreme Court on this very subject as to how long a war could last, quote unquote. So that's a possibility, though I don't think it likely. Although we have had, as you know, the Vietnam War and the Korean War and some other things, Desert Storm. Who knows if people think those qualify as wars. Potentially more troubling for me is maybe the president is issuing these executive orders pursuant to 12 U.S.C. 95A, part of the Federal Reserve Act, that was never enacted. That's again a subject for another video later. But it states in there, Congress delegates to the President authority to declare emergencies for the use of Federal Reserve notes. If in fact that's what's happened, and that's another question we're going to be presenting to traffic courts, among other things, they have to be up front and say that, because they can't rule with executive orders unless you have one of these three circumstances. Can't be done. A big case in point here is called Ex Parte Milligan, 4 Wallace 2, which I believe is 71 U.S. 2, a very famous case and easily in my top 10 on this subject matter. They can't do it. A later case, some of you might be familiar with if you studied any law in college, is Youngstown Steel versus Sawyer, 343 U.S. 579, which is about 1952, where the court held against Harry Truman when he told his Secretary of the Interior to take over all the steel mills by executive order, and the court ruled against it. And that's still a very potent case today to use, and one that we should be relying on. I'll talk more about that on a separate video. But where in the world does this president get this power from? And bear in mind, if we're talking about states of rebellion or invasion or states of war, or even states of emergency, the president is acting as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And if you look at all these damn news conferences, they're getting better about it these days. And even Trump made this mistake on election night. You see all these American flags in the back of them with yellow fringed flags. That's a military standard. I would hope they would have had more sense. I mean, you could expect it wouldn't have bothered Clinton at all. She probably wouldn't even know it. But Trump should. The people behind him should have known that. But if you see yellow fringed flags and you see them in their quote-unquote courts all the time, that's what you're looking at, a military standard, and it's damn time we start asking questions about that and make them prove they have that jurisdiction. And you'll get videos on that one down the road later too. You're going to love them. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.